Welcome to the Ada Lovelace Day podcast. My name is Sue Charman Anderson, and every month I'm highlighting the work of women in STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths. I talk to women from around the STEM world about their careers, as well as talking to women and men about historic and modern women's achievements, discoveries and inventions. This podcast is made possible thanks to the generous support of ARM, our exclusive semiconductor industry sponsor. This month, we're talking to science communicator Fran Scott about her work designing science demos for TV and for schools. We'll also be talking to Maia Weinstock, deputy editor at MIT News, who tells us about the queen of nuclear research, Chien-Shiung Wu. So I'm joined today by Fran Scott, science presenter. Hi Fran, how are you doing?
Hello, Sue. I'm doing really good, really good.
So can you tell me a little bit about what it is that you do?
Now, sometimes I dread this question because it's actually quite complicated to explain because there's a few entities to my role. So there's me as an individual and there's me as a company. So as an individual, I am the only female science presenter on children's BBC. And so I present Absolute Genius with Dick and Dom and other programs such as How to Be Epic. And I design science demonstrations to be able to show scientific ideas to children. And so over the past decade, I've been working up this experience and I'm now an expert in children's science media. So I do the television. I also write for books and I also write for stage as well. And that's where my company comes in, because over that decade, the work just grew and grew and grew. And it became to the point where I needed a company. And so now I'm the director of my production company, which is Great Scott Productions. And we take on commissions for television programs, science stage shows and demonstrations to anyone that would like them.
Wow, that sounds like a really fascinating job, actually. I feel slightly jealous.
It's a lot of fun and it's grown so much. I've been in the right place at the right time with the right attitude and the right skills for the work to just keep on coming. And with science communication, there's a lot of word of mouth and people seem to like what I do. And so word spreads and we can choose the work we do that has the right ethics that we want to deliver, because I'm a big believer of targeting those that aren't yet converted to the brilliance of science, which is why we very much focus on children. So we are growing into other fields and focusing on lay adults, so adults with little scientific understanding. There is a lot of science communication that does communicate to scientists. And the reason I got into this was it's a bit of a big ambition, but I want to change the face of science. I want science to be more inclusive for people from all backgrounds. And so the only way you can change that is to start at the bottom and start with the children and change what they think about science as they're growing up, so that it's not just those children that have the parents that do science or that have the confidence to continue to question and so have the confidence to pursue science. I want everyone that is excited about science at the age of 6 to still be excited about science at the age of 26.
And how do you think we can do that? Because this obviously is a very similar aim to Ada Lovelace Day. The big lesson I've learned over the last couple of years is the same one that you've learned, which is you've got to start with the youngsters. So how do you engage younger children in science?
It's making it relevant to them. So children are definitely not stupid. They aren't empty vessels. So you need to look at what they know. They know about science around the world. They know that if they drop a ball, it's going to fall. What you need to do is work with the knowledge that they already have to be able to pin scientific understanding within it. So what I try and do is when I'm designing a demonstration is, yes, obviously I research the science behind that demonstration, make sure I completely understand it. But then I also make sure that I understand it from a child's world. So I look at what's familiar to them, what they might be able to relate to from these different aspects within this science phenomenon, and make sure that I weave the two together so they can understand the scientific principle using things that they already know. And that empowers them in a way and makes them feel clever. And that's what I really want. I want children to feel confident and comfortable with science.
I think that makes a lot of sense. This has to fit in as well with their broader education. One of the things that we did last year was pull together an education pack for teachers, and that was actually quite challenging because teachers are so amazingly stressed and it's very hard to engage them because they just don't have time. Did you have strategies for engaging with the education system as well as doing the shows that you do?
In terms of on a lesson by lesson basis, not so much, because like you said, teachers are so busy. And at the moment, we are just a small startup of a company. I don't think we could have that kind of impact. School science wasn't necessarily my biggest encouragement into science. And I think there are a lot of tools that can help teachers to deliver science in an engaging way. So we're trying to do it through another avenue. But part of that is delivering shows into schools. And I'm a big believer that those school shows need to be free at the point of delivery. We're looking at where we can work with other organizations or corporations to be able to go and deliver a meaningful scientific message to schools that normally wouldn't be able to afford science communication to come in.
One of the things that struck me the first time we met when you did Ada Lovelace Day Live, and still, is how excited you are about your work. You live for what you do, right?
It sounds very cheesy, but no, I do love my job. But what I love is the critical thinking and the problem solving and the coming up with solutions to problems that you just think are impossible. And yes, so I worked in a lab for a year, and I hoped that that's what a lab career would be. It turned out for me, it wasn't so much, because there wasn't the high turnaround of problems that needed solving. Not in the field that I was in stem cell research. I wanted to solve problems more often. And now what I do in my career is I'm solving problems every day. And that's what I love about it. I love the fact that, because did you see the one where I lit rockets with my finger?
Yeah.
And because I remember coming up with that idea and it's not going to change the world, but I love that ingenious thinking in terms of how can we make this possible, and just trying lots of different iterations and just seeing what the result is. I went into lab work, it didn't quite deliver what I wanted to, so I've formed this job that fits my brain so well. And so yeah, I do love it because I did what I love and I ended up getting paid for it.
The ideal outcome, and I think so often it's very easy to leave STEM, as I did. I had a degree in geology, and I went from that into sort of science publishing, and then from that into music journalism. And I guess one of the things that springs to mind is that actually, if you love STEM, but academia isn't for you, there are other ways to stay in STEM. There are other aspects to STEM that maybe we don't talk about enough, and particularly around science communication. I mean, it never occurred to me when I left university and when I left science publishing that I could actually then maybe become a science journalist.
No, but the thing is, hindsight is a beautiful thing. It's only like a phrase that I always tell my staff is you're only ignorant once. At the time, if you don't know it, you don't know it. And so I think this is what I try and get across to the school kids, and especially I've started doing more career talks, is just not bombarding them, because that's not great communication, but just trying to open their eyes to this vast world of jobs that aren't the stereotypical ones that they see, that yes, they're all great jobs, but just aren't the doctors, aren't the teachers, aren't the vets. That yes, you might think that you want to do that job, but it's only because you can see it. What about if you want to work in the British Antarctic Survey? What if you want to become a marine biologist? So there's so many different jobs, and just the fact of just stating that these jobs exist, sometimes my audiences just go, I didn't know that was an option.
It's like, how many kids have actually thought that Somewhere there is someone who works tasting chocolate.
Yeah, exactly.
Why did my careers advisor never tell me that?
I make it out to sound a bit easier than it was in terms of my career path as well. Like it was, it's tough. It's not now, but it was at the beginning. It's very tough to go down the winding path rather than the straight road. And especially when you see your friends around you earning more, getting the work-life balance sorted, especially to carve a TV career, that was really challenging, because I set that as my goal in 2006 to want to try and become a children's science presenter. TV's a funny old world, because I'm not from a media family at all. So to try and get in and be in the right place at the right time takes a lot of strategy, actually. I think it was for a fair few years that I was working 3 days a week, but for 2 days a week I was working on my career but unpaid, and just making sure that I did the right things, met the right people, produced the right videos to be able to, when this opportunity came up in 2012, that my name was one that was branded round, and I was lucky enough to be able to get it. But it's a weird old world, the media. But I love it. I wanted to do TV. To me, that's the ultimate audience in terms of it had such a big influence on my life, that to be able to get into people's sitting rooms, I think is such an honor. And you can utilize that advantage to be able to get science communication across to people that wouldn't come to the festivals, that wouldn't come to the events. And I knew that I could do it right and accurate and make sure that the information was delivered by someone passionate about it. Because I remember growing up that there was, I think there was 2 female science presenters, but they weren't scientists. Yeah. And they weren't even passionate about it. That's such a shame that it's just a job to them. Yeah. And so I'm so happy with where we are at now with Absolute Genius, because especially when people come up to me and they say, thank you for doing science and being a scientist, I feel very proud that what I set out to do, I've now achieved, and hopefully will keep on achieving.
So if someone wants to move from science into science communication, and particularly TV, because I do think we need a lot more women scientists on TV, do you have any ideas for how people can make those first steps into a TV career?
Yeah, and in terms of science presenters that are on TV, I think not only do we need more female ones, but we need people from different backgrounds. Media is very rife with Oxbridge. Well, there's such a small percentage of the population, so they are not going to be able to reach the majority. So I just think we need to get our distribution a little bit more fair in terms of the representation that we have on television. Getting into children's television is very different to getting into adult science television. And it depends on what you are. So say if you're an academic and you're very keen to present your own documentary on science, you've got to do a lot of work for free. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. So I would very much start with things like BBC Breakfast, things like The One Show. They're always after experts. So just make sure that you contact them if you've got some new discovery, put it across as an idea for a segment, and maybe film yourself presenting it, but make sure that your films are no longer than 2-3 minutes. Just make sure that you're within those circles, because the hardest thing with TV is getting in and keeping your contacts, because there's a high turnover. So find out the people to contact, keep on reminding them that you exist. But once they know you exist, they will just keep on contacting you. Especially BBC Breakfast, that's a lot of content that they need. So if you can offer them a nice package that's of something that's relevant to most people, that's exciting, that's visually pleasing, you're doing their job for them. And then basically, I only know it really from the BBC side, because that's who I've done a lot of work for. Once you're in there, they tend to look at people that have been on The One Show, people that have been on The Breakfast, while they're trying to come up with ideas for science shows. But at the same time, you've got to get the balance right, because in a normal job, if you work hard and you're good at your job, there's a clear progression. Whereas it's very much in the lap of the gods with TV. So it's if someone likes you, if your face fits, if you are studying something that is in vogue, you've just got to be patient. You've got to be very patient, not pushy, but confident.
What would you say has been sort of one of your biggest challenges?
After a few years, so yes, I do the TV stuff, but as I mentioned before, we also write and produce and present science stage shows, science theatre. After about 8 years of getting in commissions for different science shows, sometimes we'd have 3 weeks to write and deliver a show, which is nothing. But we just got better and better at this over the years. One day I sat down and I was like, I want to take control of these shows myself. I want to commission a show from me. I wanted to do one on computer coding because I was getting into computer coding and looking at what was out there. And it seemed to be something that was a bit of an outlier in the world of science communication, because you had the tech groups that were looking at computer coding and you had the science communication, but the tech groups were quite new to this communication world. And so I just thought, I think we just need to combine the two. So I commissioned for myself to write a computer science stage show. At this point, the only coding I'd done was stuff that I was when I was 8 or 10 on my spectrum. So I was petrified, absolutely petrified, but it was a show that I knew was needed. And so it was a year in the making and researching and coming up with the demonstrations, but I love it. It's my baby. And I've really got into coding, actually. And I got a lot of help from the guys at Raspberry Pi Foundation. And just sort of, I went around and I met different people. I learned what was possible with coding. I learned how great the tech community is. From going from the science world, where there seems to be a bit of a, not everyone obviously, but there seems to be a bit of a cloak over your work in terms of you don't really share it. You've got to pay for journals. There's a lot of closed doors in researching science. Whereas in the tech world, they're very much open source. And I love that. I love the collaboration and I love the sharing of knowledge. And they were so, grateful's not the word, but accepting that someone wanted to come in and try and communicate computer coding in a visual way. I had my doubters, obviously, but because it was one of those things that people are like, how can you show coding in a visual way? We've done it, and I love my show. It's very large scale, so it's a nice big sort of 1,500 big theatre show, but it's great and the audiences love it. And it's explosions based, so it's turned into an explosions based computer coding show. The finale of that is we live code explosions on stage at the end. So the audience get to choose which explosions go off when. I then live code that, and then we see the output, we see the results of the explosions going off exactly how the audience have chosen them to happen. I would say that's my biggest challenge, but I'm very proud of it.
Wow, that sounds like an absolutely amazing show. It really does. So what's next for you? What's exciting that's coming up?
Well, you comics, this is a very weird time of year for me because it's recommissioning time. It's very last minute TV, so you always wait for the call, and the call will always come and it'll be like, are you free next week? And it's always that way, and you always have to juggle around. To be honest, so it's all a bit of change for me at the moment because my business has now been running a year. It's been a surprisingly successful year, which is great in terms of we've had some amazing collaborations with Google for Education. We did a tour. I've been working with Siemens, and I've been pulled out to do a lot of international work, which is fun and not something that I originally set out to do. In terms of where I'm going presenting wise, I would love to continue the children's BBC stuff, but again, unfortunately I don't have a say in that. I just have to be patient and wait and be free whenever they want me to be available. But again, because it's such an honor to be able to go straight into people's living rooms. You make time. It's not well paid. It's always high pressure. It's always fast turnaround. But I would be silly to turn that down, because I can do it well, and I don't want someone else to be brought in that can't do it well. So while I'm continuing to do it well, I want to make sure that I'm available to them. I'd love to expand into programs that suit my character in adult television. So in terms of the maker revolution, the big dirty engineering, I love those types of shows. Unfortunately, I don't think that I'm the right look for them. So I don't think it will end up being so, but I can still dream that I will get paid to see the engineering of the world. Who doesn't want to do that? And company-wise, we're just, at the moment, we're just having a meeting about where to go and who to target to make sure that we can deliver our stuff to those that need it most. And we've got a few ideas for some big projects. We're just gathering funding for those at the moment, because I self-funded my computer coding show with a little bit of a loan from the IET. But yeah, we're just looking for funding to be able to do a big project. I am also looking for lots of exciting projects, because my team are amazing. So I want to keep them engaged as well. So it's looking for projects that, not only keep my team engaged, but also target the audiences that we want in the way that we want.
Fantastic. Well, good luck with the commissioning process, and thank you so much for talking to us. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
No worries at all.
And if you want to see Fran's finger in action, the video of her Ada Lovelace Day talk is available online, and the link will be in the show notes. Thanks very much, Fran.
Thank you.
So I'd like to welcome Maia Weinstock, Deputy Editor of the MIT News. Hey Maia, how are you doing?
Great, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Fantastic, thank you. So you have chosen today to talk about Chien-Shiung Wu. Can you tell us a little bit about who she was and why you're interested in her?
Sure. So Chien-Shiung Wu was a Chinese-American nuclear physicist. She's known to many as the Chinese Marie Curie for just being particularly accomplished in her work. She was known primarily as an experimental scientist as opposed to a theorist. And, many of the things that she accomplished sort of proved various theories or disproved in her most famous case. She's known for having participated in the Manhattan Project, which was the secret project that was developing the atomic bomb during World War II. And her most famous work is, as I was hinting at before, related to overturning what was then considered a law of physics. It was called the Conservation of Parity. This actually led to a Nobel Prize, but unfortunately not for her. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but those are, that's what she's known for. And she's just a fascinating character who I was very pleased to get to know a little bit when I wrote this piece about her for the Ada Lovelace Day book that came out in 2014.
She was also very inspirational to me as well, actually, because when we were working on that book together, my husband and I were in the middle of a move to America. He came on ahead, and I had to wait for my visa, and I ended up waiting 5 months. Now, Chien-Shiung Wu actually was separated from her family for 8 years.
That's right. Yeah, so she came over to the U.S. to study as a grad student. She went to study at UC Berkeley. She had done very well for herself in her native China, but at a certain point, she was kind of above and beyond what was possible in terms of furthering her education at the level that she really desired. And so she came to the U.S., but this was sort of a time of turmoil in China, or was about to become a time of turmoil in China. And as I was saying, the world wars had been in the background, and she ended up meeting her eventual husband, pretty much right away as soon as she got to Berkeley. And she also just made many acquaintances within the Berkeley community and realized quickly that she wanted to sort of stay in the U.S., but even after they married and she decided to, continue her research in the US, it was basically impossible to go back because there was the fear that she might not be allowed to return to the US. So for those 8 years, she was basically out of contact with her family and, eventually did connect with them. But that clearly was a difficult time for her. So I was certainly inspired to hear that story. And, my mother also is an immigrant and who also came over to the US for studies. My mom's case was she was an archaeology major. But it was very similar. Like she met my dad and ended up deciding to stay here and she made her life here and made contributions to society here. And so the same thing happened with Chien-Shiung. So this was, one reason why her story resonated with me.
Yeah, I think we very easily forget that, with all the modern technology with, Skype and chat and email and, it's easy to forget that when people were out of touch, they were really out of touch back then. They didn't necessarily even have the option of letters.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, clearly this was a special case where, political situation made it even worse. But you're right. I mean, even back then, there was no email, there was no Skype. It was just very different.
So I want to go back to the conservation of parity because I've done a little bit of physics in my time, long time ago, but it was part of my degree, and I've never heard of the conservation of parity.
Right. So, there are quite a few conservation laws in physics, and this is one of the more esoteric ones. But basically, what it means is if you look at something in a mirror, okay, and the assumption was on both sides of the mirror, matter would be behaving in the same way, but just the reflection. But essentially what this proved, and in our everyday lives, that is the case. Like if you stand in front of a mirror and you hold your arm up to throw a ball or something, the exact opposite would be happening on the other side of the mirror. But apparently at the smallest levels, this turns out not to be the case. And up until Chien-Shiung worked on this problem, it was assumed that, even at the smallest subatomic levels, conservation of parity would be held up. And so it was a huge demonstration of, how experimental physics is massively important at the smallest scales, just to make sure that what we think is true is actually true. This was definitely a case where people assumed it to be true, but, there were rumblings with a number of physicists in the community at the time about, have we actually proved this? And a couple of physicists, the two that did end up going ahead and winning the Nobel Prize for this, they really developed a theory that would ultimately disprove this theory. But without Chien-Shiung's work, this would not have happened. Certainly would not have happened as quickly, but she was the one who really took their idea and made it into reality such that you can actually point to her experiment and, decisively say this, actually overturned this law. So that's massively impressive to me.
Now, at the time, conservation and parity, that was something that was as important as gravity.
Well, I'm not sure if it was as important in the sense that, I don't know how you describe importance or give importance to various laws, but it was considered as like a hard and fast rule as gravity was, the laws of gravity. So in that sense, yes, it was as standard and fundamental as, Newton's laws. But certainly most people on an everyday level wouldn't necessarily probably even know what parity was. But that doesn't mean that, it wasn't as critical of a discovery. I mean, it was one of the fastest Nobel Prizes to happen from the turnaround from when the paper was published in early January of 1957, or that's when it was submitted anyway. I don't remember the exact pub date. But anyway, the Nobel Prize was given that same year. So that was clearly a huge discovery. And so, that was a major deal.
And so you said she didn't actually get a part of the Nobel Prize.
Correct. Many people have said that she is one of the most glaring examples of a woman being snubbed, essentially, and having done work that would have, in many cases, been considered worthy of a Nobel. That said, there have been many cases where theorists have won over experimentalists for the same work. So she wasn't the only one for whom that happened. In fact, her own graduate advisor had essentially came up with the idea for a cyclotron, and the people who actually put it together at Berkeley, like they were the ones who made it, but they didn't win anything. So it's not the first time that it's happened, but unlike many of the physics experiments that happen today, so if you think of something like the Higgs boson discovery or even the LIGO experiment, which has not won a Nobel yet, but hopefully it will soon, many hundreds or thousands of experimentalists were involved. And certainly in this case, in Chien-Shiung's case, there were other people that worked with her and that she directed and made the experiment happen. But she was really the originator of the idea, and she went down to DC where the experiment took place and just oversaw the whole thing. And it was really her project. It wasn't a case of like, well, there are hundreds of people, who could we possibly give it to if we were going to just pick one experimentalist? It was clear that it was her project. So in that sense, it was unfortunate that they didn't give it to her because, the Nobel Committee does tend to give to up to 3 people. So she would have been a natural third. And, some people say that it was because of her gender. I mean, I don't think we'll ever fully know. But at the same time, she did win many, many other, just about every other major physics award. So, she was recognized within her community. But it would have been nice if she had also been recognized with a Nobel.
To tell us a little bit more about her work on the Manhattan Project.
So Chien-Shiung, when she and her husband married and decided to go across the country I think he had gotten a job. He was also a scientist, and he was working in New Jersey, I believe, and she was also in the East Coast. They weren't necessarily together around the same time. They weren't necessarily in the same city at the same time always. But at a certain point, she managed to get a job in New York City working with the Manhattan Project, where she was helping to purify uranium for use in atomic weapons during this time when all the development was happening up to the production of a useful atomic bomb. And so she essentially helped turn uranium into a form that was usable for the project. She also actually, even earlier in her career, had also participated in sort of the development of the bomb even before her work at Columbia. There was a great case example where she had been asked by Enrico Fermi, who was leading the tests of trying to make a large-scale self-sustaining plutonium reaction. And they were having problems with this. And the reaction would happen, but it would sputter out after a short while. And so Enrico Fermi was told by someone to ask Miss Wu, that was like the quote, and he did, and she quickly devised the problem and figured out what the problem was. So basically she, solved one of the most difficult problems at the time, a nuclear physicist, and it came very quickly to her. And so, I don't know, I love hearing that story, how here she is sort of like a miracle worker in this particular case. And it just, not that she didn't work hard for it, but, she relatively quickly had an inkling of what the problem was. And so, it's a great story of how, most people don't recognize how important she was to the development of the bomb, but it was in multiple ways. So
what do you think is really the sort of the her key achievement, the thing that we should remember her for?
Well, I mean, I think the overturning of the Conservation of Parity is really her biggest achievement. But, she also, in addition to helping with the self-sustaining plutonium problem, she was an expert in beta decay, which is basically a radioactive decay in which an electron is emitted. And, she contributed much to this area. And so that's one thing that she's well known for and that people should know her for. And she also actually did some other random things throughout her career, which are important, but maybe not as well known. She helped to develop a better Geiger counter, which measures radioactivity. And she actually, toward the end of her career, also did some research in the biophysics of sickle cell anemia, which is fascinating to hear. She totally changed directions a little bit. But, overall, I think her story is just one of perseverance. She was a very hard worker and really inspired a lot of people to do their best. And she was just super, super highly accomplished. So, and, in many cases, she wasn't very well known in the popular culture. I mean, within her field, she certainly was. But for that reason, I think she's someone that people should get to know a little bit.
And they can get to know her. You can get to know Chien-Shiung Wu in the Ada Lovelace Day book, Passion for Science. And there's a link to that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Maia, for your time and for telling us all about Chien-Shiung Wu.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Many thanks to Fran and Maia for talking to me this month. If you want to see Fran light rockets with her finger, you can watch her video from Ada Lovelace Day Live 2013 on our website. And you can read an excerpt of Maia's chapter about Chien-Shiung Wu, which was published in our first book, A Passion for Science, Stories of Discovery and Invention. Just visit us at findingada.com/podcast/episode 2. Thanks again to our sponsor, ARM. You can learn more about ARM on their website at arm.com, and you can follow them on Twitter at @armholdings. And if you'd like to join ARM as a co-sponsor of our podcast, then please email me at suw@findingada.com. Next month, we have a geology special, in which I'll be talking to Hazel Gibson about how the metaphors we use for geological concepts, like underground rivers, affect how well we understand geological processes. And I'll also hear from Dr. Eric Clemetti about the work of volcanologist Professor Anita Grunder. You can subscribe to our podcast now on iTunes, Google Play and Stitcher, and you can follow us on Twitter at @FindingAda. All our links are, of course, in the show notes on our blog. If you'd like to send us feedback about the show, or if you'd like to take part, you can email me at sue@findingada.com. See you next month!